We will start. Able to see my screen, everyone? Okay. So today we will start with something called static. It is kind of a very important concept in Java, not the object-oriented concept. Uh, because most of the projects kind of it will use static to initialize certain variables or to call certain methods without use of an object, and whatever we create in a static will be created at the time of compile time itself in a memory type. I just show what is a static. For example, let's create a new package and we'll start this. I'll just say in the source folder create new package and just say static test. I'm just creating a new class here. Along with the main method. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create an variable here, right? Let's say integer variable, int a. Let's initialize this variable with some default values. Let's initialize with it with let's say 3, right? So what I wanted to do to access this variable, I just wanted to create an object for this class, right? As we saw previously, main method, it can be anywhere, it doesn't matter. I'll just initialize a object for this class. Right. So if I wanted to initialize or just print this, what I'll do, I'll just do sysout. I'll give something like this, right? So now what will be printed? This 3 is printed, right? Because we initialize value 3, I just initializing the object for that class, and we are just printing that a variable by calling that a, right? So let's say I am just overriding this value, right? sc dot a is equal to 4, overriding and printing it here. So what will be printed here? Can anyone say? Yeah, 4 will be printed, right? 4 is printed. So we'll see one more example. I am initializing one more object for this class. Let's say sc1 is equal to new static and I'm just going to set this a value 5 here, right? And I'm copying this and printing the same thing here. So now what will happen? What is printed in this line and what is printed in this line? Yes, it's 4 and 4, right? Because whatever value we are changing here is completely different object. It doesn't affect the value which is here, right? A we are changing here, but it is from the completely different object, right? So that's the point. But static is kind of little opposite to this concept, right? What if I declare this particular thing static? Now immediately it is throwing me a warning, right? What warning it is? The static field example should be accessed in a static way. It is still allowing us, but it is trying to warn us, like you can see the warning here. Static field, which is A, should be accessible. Hello. Mm, hello. Everyone able to hear me?
Yes, Karthik.
Okay. Power suddenly went off. I'm connecting with my mobile. Fine. So now it is throwing the error, right? The static field should be accessed in a static way, actually, right? So let's try to run this program now. And now what is happening? You can see the values 4 and 5, right? Why it's not 4 and 4? Okay. Uh, Previously, when we didn't declare this static, it is coming as 4 and 4. Why? Because whatever we printed A, this A belongs to this object SC, and whatever we are going to print, I mean, change the value here doesn't affect this SC because it is a completely different object called SC1, right? So whatever value we change here, didn't affect that. But when we declare this as static, this is affecting, right? We are changing the value of A in the completely different object, then it is affecting the value in the object SC itself, right? Getting the whole point, right? I'll just try to explain what is a static. For example, let's say this is a class, right? Class we have. The static example class has one variable which is called A, right? Which is declared to the default value 3 at the time of initialization itself, right? Right, this is our class, right? So whenever we are creating a object for the class, a new copy of the particular class is instantiated, right? So when I say new copy, a new copy itself is created in the memory like this. We initialize two classes here, right? SC and SC1. So let's put two classes here, right? This is static example object which is of SC, which we created, and which has integer variable what we initialized. We initialized as 4 here, right? And same goes here, right? Here SC1 and we are initializing what with the in the value 5, right? So this is a two representation of the class in our memory, right? So we have the base class which is pre-initialized with the value 3, the a variable. We have one object for the same class which is initialized with the value 4, and another object sc1 with the value 5. So whatever values we change here is not going to in usual scenario. Let's not consider this a as static now. In usual scenario, what is going to happen? Whatever value we change here will not affect here, because these are two different memory containers, right? This is like two different homes we have. Like whatever we changes we do in this home is not going to change here, because these are two different separate entities, two different homes in the right, in the memory. But what if you declare something as static, like we declared here, right? We declared a is static here, right? What if you declare static? What Java will do is like take this a, we declare this a only as static, right? We take this a and put it in a new container which is a public container, right? We remove this a from the two instances and put a here, and it will erase the a from the individual objects memory, right? Now what will happen? This is a public area. This is not a private area like individual objects you see here, right? So it will take that a before, because it is declared as static, and put it in a public memory location like this. So when I say public, any object can go and access it. When I use some public entity, right? Like let's say I'm living in some city, I want to use some public park. What will happen? Anybody can go and use that park. It's not like it is a cell phone property of me, right? I can go, you can go, some other person can go and use that park. But what happens after using? If I leave some trail on that park, the same thing will be kind of appearing for everyone, right? For example, if I put some trash over that, the trash is kind of accessible to everyone, right? It's not kind of something which has to be removed by me or used by me, because it's a public area. It should be used by everyone, right? So what happens when I say this sentence sc dot a is equal to 4? I'm trying to override this value, but not here, not in this memory location. What I'm going to do, what I'm doing, I'm just going here, right? I'm just going here and changing this value a to 4, right? Right. So when this particular statement is executing, it is going into this public area, accessing this a and changing this value to 4, right? And it is again new object is created, something like this. A is not contained in this new object because it is declared as static. Now what we are doing, we are again changing the value of 5 through this object. Now what it will do, this object will come into this public area, try to access this a value, and it will change the value to 5 permanently, right? Right. So now if we try to print this a using any object, it will show 5 only, because that is the latest value which is changed, right? So this whenever you declare this as any variable as a static, it is kind of common to all the objects. It's not restricted into only that particular object. This value is accessed across all the objects. It's common for all the objects. If you change that value in one instance, it will reflect in the other instance, because it is a public area. So are we good with the static? No, why it is called static? Static is something, because people get carried away with the name static, right? Static is not something which is static value. We think static is like which is a kind of static in every single way. It's not going to change like that. It's not like that. Static will change, but the changes will be common for all the objects that is created across our project. there are a lot more concept of static. This is just the beginning. So any confusion with this whatever I said now? Hello?
Can you go to the program?
The voice is breaking. Everyone able to hear me clearly, right? Okay.
Hi, can you execute this program once more with with A as static and with A as without static?
Yes. So let's remove the static now. So now what happens? We are creating an object SC. We are assigning a value 4. We are printing it. We are creating a complete different object SC1, assigning the value 5, printing the first object only, not the second object, right? This is the SC object only. We are again printing. Now, if we try to run this, it is again 4 and 4 because we are printing the value A, which is present inside this object SC only, SC container only. Once we do something like this only, it is going to print 5, right? SC1 dot A. Then only it's going to print 5 because we are printing the value of A inside this object SC1. Now the output will be 4, 4, and 5, right? Like this. Let's comment this out. But if we declare this static, what will happen? As I said previously, the static is kind of common to all the objects created, right? Changes in one object is going to reflect in the other object. So I'm initializing SC as 4 here, A as 4 here in the SC object, but I'm again setting this A value as 5 in the SC1 object, right? So whatever we do final, that is the final change that is available in the program. So whenever we try to print this SC or even this SC1, both the scenario, it is 5 only actually now. 4, 5, and 5, right? Because we already changed the value for SA in the SC1 object after doing this.
So here, how come the second print, that is line number uh, 19?
Mhm.
So it's sc dot a. So
Yes.
how come it's printing 5?
Yeah, that's the whole point of
So
static
because
actually.
sc
Uh,
is 4 only, right?
yeah, S is 4 only, but because we declare this A as static, it will remove this A from individual memory container of these objects, right? And put it in a common memory container like this, right? Whenever you declare any variable as static, something like this, what it will do, this A becomes common for everything. It is not aligned to this individual object SC or SC1. That's the whole point of static itself. So what I'm going to do, this A is in a public area, right? I can go and change this A, and if I go and change something, then the changes only will reflect for if you come and see, right? For example, we are using a public park, and what I'm going to do, I'm planting some very big tree in that park, and whenever you come to that park, you will see the tree, right? It's not kind of a individual park which I own and I'll be able to do it. What is without static is like it's a kind of individual park. What you own, you will only see. What I own, I will see. I cannot go and see you or modify your values there, right? Whenever it's public, I can go modify something there, and that modified thing only is available to everyone. If you modify something, that modified thing will be available to me, because it's a kind of a public area and anybody can go and change it here. That's the whole point. So what is happening, I'm changing value of A4 here. okay, the value of a is 4 is changed, but where it is changing? It is changing here in the public area only. It's changing. So whenever I'm trying to access the value of 4 after this point, anywhere in any object, the value will be 4 only. For example, even without setting this, right? Even without setting this, if I try to print sc1.a like this, then value will be 4 and 4 only, because we didn't set a value of a in the sc1, right? Ideally it should be 3 default value, but it's still printing 4. Maybe we'll try to add some text. The se object is right, SC object and SC1 object. We have changed the value of 4 in the SC object. We have initialized a new object SC1. We didn't do anything. We didn't assign the value of A inside SC1. But if we try to access the value SC1 here, A object here using SC1, it is still 4 and not 3, because A is in a public area and we already changed the value of A to 4 already here in the line number 11. Doesn't matter in which object it is going to change, because A becomes common for all the object which is created, right? No, because it will be kind of confusing, because whatever we saw previously is kind of contradicting to this. But that is the whole point of static. If you don't declare this static, it is in the usual way. If you declare it as static, then take the A and put it in a common container. That's the whole point. What if I have something like B, int B is equal to 7, right? I'm just setting B value here in SE object, sc.b is equal to 23, something like this, right? Now what happens if we try to print B using SE1? Like this. So we are initializing value of 7 to B here. We are assigning value of B to 23 here. In what object? SC object. But we are printing SC1A and SC1B here, right? So now what will be the output if I execute in this line? What will be the output? Can anyone say? Yes, it is 4 and 7, right? 4 and 7. What if I declare this B as static? Now what is the output? Yes, 4 and 23. So we are getting the point, right? What is the use of static and what is not use of static? Everyone, any confusion with respect to static variables? These variables cannot be, not necessarily be int, it can be anything. It can be boolean, it can be string, or it can be character, anything, right? So one more thing which I wanted to show is like, it's showing me a warning here. Static field should not be accessed in should be accessed in a static way. What it's saying is like, see, we are getting confused, right? How a value, this A value, which is of object SC, if we are doing something like this, then the change is reflected in the value of object SC1 also. So it's kind of confusing, right? To use. So what Java did is like, Java did a very good way of accessing the static values, right? You ideally you should not access a static value through an object. It will throw a warning. It will not throw an error, it will throw a warning. It's an object, right? What is a way of accessing a static value? Like through directly the class itself, right? Like this, if you put, the warning has gone, right? What I'm saying is, like, instead of creating an object of the class sc and trying to access this variable a through that object, I'm, because it is static, I'm trying to access this value by the class name itself, and it is possible in Java, right? Class name dot variable name is equal to 4, so it is kind of not confusing, right? It is not kind of restrict to this object level. It's kind of kind of a common area at the class level, so I can directly do this, right? Let's, for time being, let's remove the static from B, and I'll just put this here, right? So now what is the output of the program? Let's remove these two lines. We are statically accessing, that is through the class name itself, we are accessing the value a is equal to 4, we are assigning the value 4. Through the object, we are assigning the value b is equal to 23. We are initializing the new object, and we are printing something here, right? So now, if the line of execution comes to line number 22, what is the output of the program? Can anyone say? Yes, it is 4 and 7, right? Because we are changing the value of a to 4 here, and we are trying to access b through the object sc1, where we didn't initialize the object value for b, so it is taking the default value 7. So it is always mandatory or always good practice to access a static variable directly through the class instead of doing something like this, right? Right, we got the point, right? And what if this is also static?
Class dot a equal to 4. So this can be done only for static, is it?
Ditya, can you be little loud? Your voice is little feeble, actually.
Class dot a
Yeah.
equal to 4. So
Mhm.
that it can be done only for static.
Yes. Let's try to do this for b. It's throwing me an error, right? What error? Cannot make static reference to a non-static variable. It's saying b as non-static variable. So calling directly through a class is static reference. So I cannot do that. It will throw an error. What it is suggesting, changing b to static. So I'll change b to static. Right? Now it is possible. Right? Again, if you try to run this program, it is 4 and 23 because we changed the value of b here to 23. Right? Static is very important concept. We don't have to put everything in an object. One particular field may be kind of common to all the objects to access, right? Uh, there may be some fields which are common, which can be accessed at the runtime without initializing the object, and changed values can be reflected anywhere. Those kind of use cases will come. In those use cases, statics are very useful, actually. Let's change this to string. It can not necessarily be integer. It can be a string also. So we're changing the value of xyz, so that is only reflecting. So this static variable can be anything. It can be a string, it can be integer, it can be a boolean, right? So are we good with what is a static variable? Right. What about others? Are we good?
Karthik, I have a doubt. Like the static concept, in which while coding example, in what scenario do we use?
Okay. Let's say we have a mm, we have some scenario where we want to change the values at the runtime. Uh, let's see some use case. Right? Um, let's say you are trying to implement a counter kind of thing, right? Let's say this value of instead of the, let's say it's counter. Okay, counter we are initializing to 0, right? It's some basic example, right? What I'm saying is like there should be some way where if some condition happens, this counter value has to be increased by whatever class it is using, right? So whenever some condition happens, I just have to increase this counter value by 1. If some condition happens, I cannot go and create any individual object and access this object and try to increase this value of counter for my scenario, right? I can, if some condition meets some condition, some random condition, some if condition is true, I can some initialize this counter like this, right? And in some other line of programming, in some other class, some other condition might become true. Then if that condition also, then I have to increase this counter value, right? So what output I'll be getting here, the output I'll be getting is here is whatever the final value that I'll be getting, right? Let's put this in this way. um, okay, sorry, not like this. We'll just initialize a value like this. um, let's say one more variable incrementer. We initialize value, right? So what if I wanted to do something like this based on some logic? I, in completely different object, I want to change this value based on some logic and conditions here, right? So in those cases, uh, I wanted to change a particular static value, not to the initial value that is initialized, but based on the logic that we are doing here, some logic here, some true condition happens here in this logic, and we wanted to set some value like this. at the runtime whenever this logic happens. So we don't want to stay the static value to 0 or whatever initialized previously like this, right, to 1 or something like this. We in program we will have multiple logics where we can change the values according to the logic implemented. This is a common use case. There may be multiple implementations of that. There are many good examples where you use. Maybe I'm not getting the kind of use case in my mind currently now. Maybe I'll try to give an example in the next class also. But most common use case will be something like this, where one object will be trying to change the value of the static variable if some condition is passing as true, and if other object is changing if based on another condition, in which the second condition has to override the first condition, right? Because after this line of code is executed, the counter value should no longer stay as 1 or 0 initially. It should stay as 5, something like this logic should be there. And in those kind of examples, static is kind of very useful. So whatever we set finally that is only going to come into that counter value, and that is going to be printed. Maybe I'll try to come with a real-time example in next class. There are many examples. I'm not currently getting it in my mind. Fine. Okay, the voice is, I mean, the noise is there, or my voice is clear now, or okay. One more thing we'll try to do now. So we have seen static variables, right? There are, okay, just give me a second. What about the background noise now? It's clear now? Okay. So let's try to delete all these things. We don't want our program to be clumsy. Okay, we have a class static example. We have two static variables, and we have our main method here, and we can go and create some of our own custom methods, right? Let's say public void print data. This is a common syntax for every method creation, right? We'll print something here. So now how we can call this method? How we can call this print data method? Yeah, create an object, right? For what class? The static example class. Okay. So I'll do, I just call this method by that object, right? sc dot print data, right? So if you try to run this program, whatever inside this method is executed. Now what will be the output? The output is value of a is abc, right? We are initialize this abc like this, right? But what if I have to, what if I don't need to create an each and every object to print this particular method, because this method is common and it is doesn't depend upon any particular object to call this method, right? In those cases we can declare this particular method itself as static, something like this. After a public keyword you can put static, right? You can do like this. If you try to print, like, it's showing a warning, right? Again, static method, printed as a static method, and it should be accessed in a static way. Even accessing through an object is possible, as we saw in the examples of accessing a static variable using an object. It's possible, it will be executed, but it's not recommended way. So how can we call this particular method then? Now if we declare this method as static,
Static example dot print data.
yes, that's it. So we don't need an object to call this method. So whenever we declare a method itself as static, we can call this method directly from anywhere without initializing an object. It's the whole point, right? So I'll just show one more example. What if I have a second class here, right? I have a class called test static. In this, I have a method, public void test my static class, something like this. I have a method. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to access this particular print data method from this class inside this method. So what can I do? I wanted to access this print data method inside this test my static class method, which is inside the test static class. So what should I do here?
Test static dot print data.
No, you cannot do something like this, right? Because test static doesn't have any methods on its own. It's not throwing any suggestions, right? This method is present where, in which class? The static example class, right? And this method is static inside the static example class, right? So if I wanted to access this method, I can access only through this class, right? Static example dot print data, right? Then only it's possible, right? Just because it is in the same class, we are not knowing the difference. But as we said previously, main method will execute irrespective of any class. So we are just calling this print data method static in a static way in another class called test static, like this. You cannot go and say test static dot print data, because this print data method itself is not there in the test static class, right? Okay, other people got the point, right? What if I wanted to access this method? How can I access? Let's say I wanted to access this method inside our main method, right? Inside here. How can I do that? Oh, I wanted to access this test my static class method inside our main method in this class. What should I do?
We have to create an object.
Yes. Now if we call that method, and try to run this. Then it is calling the same function twice because we are calling one time here, another time through that class itself, right? What if I don't want to create an object here? I wanted to call this method directly. I just have to put this as a static, right? This method as static. So in that case, I can directly call through this class name itself, right? Again, the same output. You're getting the whole point, right? How and why static is used. Static methods can be called from other classes also, just by referring to its class name and its static method name. Class name dot static method name. So are we good with static? Everyone, can you respond in chat? Okay.
Can you go to the test static class?
Okay.
So in line number 5, you've written public static void.
Yes.
So it's a main method or what? Because it's not
No, it's
main
not
is
main
not there.
method. It's not main method. Because main method is there only in this class. So wherever the main method is there, that class can be executed, right? So whenever I'm executing this program, I'm running what? I'm running the static example only, not test static, right? But the test static method can be called in a static way like this. It's not compulsory that main method has to be only static. Any method can be static. It's just a matter of how we are calling that method, right? This main method will be called internally by our compiler, and this this method is called explicitly by the user by calling its class name, right? Any method can be static. It's not like main method should be only static. It's our custom defined method. It can be static as well. So to make your question more clarified, right? Then why now comes the important question: why we are having this main method as static? Then, if you remove the static from the main method, then what will happen? It's still there, but it's throwing an error, right? What error is throwing if you remove the static from the main method? Main method is non-static and it cannot be executed, right? That is the error it is showing, right? So why it is compulsory? Now we have discussed what is a static. Static is a kind of common area where every object has its access. Yeah, object we can we cannot not necessarily instantiate an object and call that method. That method can be called without instantiation of object itself. And one change we do in that object is reflected in the other objects also. It's kind of a common memory pool, common memory area. So now think and say why static is compulsory in main method. Now we have good idea of static, right? It's a very simple answer only. Why static is compulsory in main method? Yes, exactly. So main method should not depend upon any object, right? That's the whole point. How the program will execute. Program will not go and create an object and then call the main method, and all, right? So main method should be always static because this main method should not be accessed through any object. It should be accessed directly through the class that is executing it, right? So only the main method is common for all the objects irrespective of wherever it class, right? Main method can be in this class, main method can be in this class, anywhere, right? it's not necessary strictly necessary to create a main method in any one particular class. Main method can be anywhere irrespective of the class. So only we are declaring main method as static. It is absolutely necessary to declare main method as static. So because we cannot or should not access the main method through any object, that violates the main method concept itself, right? How we are going to execute the Java program itself. So only the static is necessary. Then why public is necessary in main method? Public is necessary because main method can be anywhere inside our program. If we declare private, this as private, then it's throwing some warning, right? It is never used. And if you try to run this, actually, it's again throwing an error. Why it's throwing an error? Because when our compiler try to execute this main method, it will search for entire project for main method. So if you do particular thing as main, then it is that do particular method as private, then that particular method is restricted only to that class, right? It cannot be accessed anywhere. Other programs cannot use this main method, uh, right? For example, we are using another class called test static inside our main method, right? Since it is private, how it will come and execute this? I will just take this test class as an example. It cannot be private, right? It should be public only, main method. So only main method is always public, always static, and main method is always void because main method doesn't return anything. It just executes something. If we try to change this as int, throwing an error again, right? Method must result return a result, something like that. So it doesn't going to return any result, right? Main method doesn't have to return any result because main method we are calling just to execute certain pieces of code. Starting point of execution is a main method. So we don't have to necessarily return any value here, right? So only main methods are always public, static, and void. Deepta, are we clear? Okay. So a static variable is always a container which is present in the common memory area like this, and static method is also in a common memory only, so which can be accessed across any uh, place directly by referring to its class, right? Class name dot that method name, right? And whatever we do changes to that particular data is reflected across all the data and so on. Right. Maybe in the next class I'll come with a real-time example of a static variable where it is used. Right. There is one more thing called static class. Can we declare this class as a static? Can anyone say? Let's try to do this. Throwing an error, right? Illegal modifier. Only public, abstract, and final are permitted, right? But we can declare class as static in one special scenario. We'll see what is that scenario in next class. So understand that class can be also static, but in only one in special scenario. We'll see that tomorrow. But generally, variable can be static. A method can be static like this. Main method is always static. And a class can be static in any one particular scenario. I'll just explain that tomorrow. All right. So if you have any doubts with respect to static, you can ask here. Otherwise, we will wind up the session. Anyone? Anyone has any other question to ask with respect to static? Okay. I just wanted to show one more thing. We are calling this out, right? If you see, it is also declared as static, right? And why this is declared as static, can anyone say? Because of that only we are calling this directly, right? System is a class. How we are just calling this out without initializing an object? Because it is declared as static. So only we are able to do something like this. Static has many use cases. Maybe I'll try to come with an example. Okay, if no one has any other question, then probably we can wind up the session, right? Okay.